Good morning. First of all, I want to say it's pretty cool to see a bunch of familiar names on the list. So I see a bunch of industry colleagues and graduates and other people I have known through industry throughout the years, so welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about why our school decided to adopt Katana in our education curriculum. Once I'm through, it'll probably be pretty obvious, and you'll probably be asking yourself, if your school does not already have this tool, why not? So Katana was originally developed by Sony. It was released to industry in 2011, but so our school started in 2012. It was one of the first tools we looked at, but we couldn't get it. It finally became available to schools 7 years later in 2018. So we brought it in, installed it, got it running, and we had it in part of our production pipeline by 2019. Katana is the fastest growing industry product, fastest growing Foundry product right now. And what that means is that the industry needs TDs, lighting TDs who are trained in Katana. So the reasons for adoption are pretty straightforward. In addition to that, there's there's a good reason why industry has been adopting this tool at a very fast pace. So what appeals is that everything is referenced. The interface is a node-based interface. So if you're familiar with Nuke and other node-based software, you probably understand the value of a procedural workflow. Procedures are what make us efficient, and they keep studios financially healthy. So as production managers, we should be really interested in tools that convert our workflows to procedural. And therefore, as educators, we should be interested in training in those tools. So one of the great things we love about Katana is that everything is referenced. So some applications contain their scene elements, such as geometry, which can make scenes really, really heavy, slow, and difficult to edit. But when everything is referenced, switching out assets is simple. We can update instantly many different scene files with a single change. And if all scene files are using the same reference asset, we know that all scenes contain the latest approved version. And as those of us from industry know, version control is really important. We run into a lot of trouble when we have a lot of different versions of the same asset floating around in different scenes. And everything referenced really helps us avoid that. So the interface being node-based is a big deal. It makes it easy to figure out what you've done so you can see the flow of your work. It makes it easy to diagnose problems because you can select whole groups of nodes and disable them. It makes it really easy to branch off and do experiments in different versions. So if you're doing your breakouts for your render passes, super, super simple with the node-based system. Nodes make everything easier. And since nodes are procedures, and since procedures are speed, and speed equals on time and on budget delivery, it's kind of a no-brainer that we should be using procedural node-based workflows wherever possible. So what is the actual experience like? Well, there's good and bad, of course. The highly procedural design permits massive collaboration and efficiency. So specifically, there's something called collection expression language, which is just a little scripting language inside Katana. It allows you to instantly access all types of anything and make a change to them. For example, we just completed a project at the school, and in a couple of shots, we have these lighting pylons on the moon, and there's like 75 of them. And if we need to make a change, or if we want to apply a shader or change a shader, in the old days, we would be grabbing all those elements and changing them one by one, or trying to multi-select them and change them. With CEL, we can make a change with a line of code. So it's super efficient for larger, massive data sets. One of my favorite things about Katana is that it lets us create tools as what Katana calls macros. And all a macro is just a kind of a node container filled with a bunch of other nodes. So you can create any node network contain it inside a macro, and then distribute it to everybody instantly. So if you drop it in a specific directory and everybody's environment variables are pointing to that directory, which is very easy to set up, and I create and save a macro, for example, a turntable tool or a lighting rig, and I put it in a directory, the person next to me can click tab and get that node and drop it into their scene file. It's so slick, it's unbelievable. So this is one really simple example of how this node-based workflow and the ability to save these nodes and distribute them makes the workflow super fast. Katana connects to a bunch of popular renderers. It comes shipped with 3D Light, which is a really beautiful, really artist-friendly and modern renderer. So it's a path tracer, so very modern technology there. And the software developers of 3D Light are great with their support as well. So we used 3D Light on our first project. If you're familiar with node-based workflows already, it feels familiar. And that's a real benefit. Another one of my favorite things is look files. So what a look file is you can take, well, what they're commonly used for is shaders. So we build shaders, we add our textures, we develop a look for an asset, and then we can save that look as a look file. And the beauty is that the look file is really a baked document. So one of the things that's really important in a really good production pipeline is what we call clean interdepartmental handoff. So for example, when we hand animation to lighting, we really don't want to hand them a rig that can be accidentally tweaked or changed. So we bake out our animation into, for example, an Alembic format or an FBX format or something. So when the lighting department gets it, they don't have any, there's no controls, there's no way they can change the animation. But there really hasn't been much of a way to do that for lighting, and the look file actually does that for us. It lets us publish a shader or basically anything, and the person at the other end has no controls to change it. And what this does is it guarantees that the approved published version is the version that comes out of the next department. There's so many, the pipeline is really complex, and one of the biggest complexities in the pipeline is human error. People make mistakes all the time. It's very easy to accidentally tweak something if you have the controls to do it, and then come out the other end and realize that, oh my God, I actually moved the camera, and now the entire render does not line up with the approved animation. So if we send that as a baked animation file, a baked camera, then it can't be changed. And it's really desirable to have that in every department, and that's what I really like about the look files out of Katana. Once you get a bunch of your custom tools set up, so you can set up tools to have your studio run the way you want, then using those tools makes your workflow really, really fast. So this is the main benefit of the procedural workflow out of Katana. It makes for efficiencies, which reduces budget, which increases the bottom line, which keeps the studio healthy. And the bad is, well, you don't just install it and it runs. Okay, it takes a little bit of understanding about how to create environment variables. The Foundry has a really good document about how to create what we call a startup batch file that includes where your renderer is installed and what renderer you want to use, and a few other path locations. For example, if you want to distribute macros, so you have to set up a few things. So it's a little bit of work to get it up and running. So it's not for the person who wants to just, install it and run it. Using the tool, it's a very, very technical tool. So yes, lighting artists can use it to create great artistic pictures, but they can also do that in any software. That's not what Katana is about. What Katana is about creating efficiencies for the studio. And because of that, it comes with a lot of technical ability that requires some technical knowledge. So the one thing that we've talked about at our end is that we kind of wish it came with a few more packaged tools. There's arguments against that. For example, one of the things I'm always thinking is, well, why doesn't it come just with a turntable tool built in, with a couple of lights and a turntable all set up, and you just attach your geometry and render it? And the argument is, well, yeah, but different studios have different standards for what their turntable should be like and how long it should be and how many times it should rotate. So every turntable tool is different. So there's that argument. From our end, we think it would be a little bit easier to get started with if it came with a few more prepackaged actual. It does come with some prepackaged example files that you can look at and learn from. You know, when I originally wrote this, it says not super user friendly. That was when I was first learning Katana. I understand why I wrote this at the time, and it's because Katana is different. It's not hard. It's just a different way of thinking about doing your work. But if you're unfamiliar with node workflow, it's going to be a bit of a challenge to wrap your head around it. The documentation when I originally wrote this was a little bit underwhelming, but I see that they've added a whole bunch of videos. We've also created a bunch of free training videos for getting started with Katana to our students. It's free for everybody though. So anybody can go on there and have a look through. So if you're interested in getting started in Katana, you can have a look at some of the little getting started videos. To get a lot out of Katana, I think it's almost a requirement to know Python. That said, it's my opinion that any professional CG or visual effects artist should know Python because it'll enable them to automate boring, repetitive tasks and eliminate human error a lot. So that's just my opinion. And I encourage all my students to learn Python. We offer it to them at our school. Lua is another scripting language for advanced use, but to be really effective in Katana, you have to learn the collection expressions language. So it's just a little scripting language, and it's actually very simple little scripting language. A few examples, and you kind of start wrapping your head around the syntax and how it works and how it does what it does. So our students, without being taught, picked up and used CEL within the first month of this past project, and they got really, really good at it without instruction. So that was pretty good. So I've already talked about some of the awesome stuff. So Foundry assigns a specialist to get you set up. At least they did for me. I'm assuming they would for anybody who wanted to get set up. Their documentation is always improving and growing. Their team is super committed to making Katana artist friendly. So, you know, in the course of learning Katana and bringing it into our pipeline, and then of course transferring that knowledge to the students, we discovered lots of little things that weren't super obvious or friendly or were a little bit obscure. And the Foundry team has always been very, very open to, you know, making tweaks and changes that make things a little bit easier for artists. In this couple of versions ago, they added a new node-based material network, which is really great. I love building node-based shaders. The raw power of proceduralism. So I can't say enough about proceduralism. Procedures make everything work better, faster, and less expensively. They permit artists to go home and sleep at night and have a family and a life. And they permit studios to, you know, have a profit margin. So, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. I refer to myself as the jaded old CG guy. And Katana is the first time in a long time that I've actually been excited about a tool. Our final word would be, if you want your training to be current, you should be adopting Katana. And everybody will benefit from that. The students will benefit, the industry will benefit, and as trainers for industry, which is what we are, that should be our goal. So I say thank you. I guess over to you, Brian.